Hello Biblioniauts and all the reading creatures, I am back as promised. Today I'm gonna try to do something different. I have notes of the things I've been reading and I'm gonna try to order my thoughts as opposed to climb a mountain and scream through the wind, trying to remember books and forgetting literally half of the books that I read. So I'm not gonna go back to that, what's done is done. But since the last video and now, I have been reading other books and thinking about other things, and I thought I must share that with you. The first thing, and the most important, is I have decided to, not the most important, but I have decided to postpone the reading of the Golden Papillon and read a couple of books in between to see if I sort of like can refresh myself and then go back and maybe reread it. And I'll probably do something crazy that I do sometimes, not crazy, but like sometimes when I want to read a book that's like I'm really struggling with, I like book a room on a library or something like that. I bring a sandwich and a couple of liters of water, and I tell to myself I will not leave this room until I have finished this book. The longest book that I have ever been able to read in one sitting was 350 pages, something like that. It was SPQR by Mary Beard. I think, no, that one I read in 2 sittings. I think it was Entangled Life. I don't know, one of the 2, basically, that were 300 something pages. This is definitely shorter, so it should be possible to do that. The thing is, there's no library for me here to book this, and this only really works if I book a room on a public place. If I am on my room, that's not gonna work. If I am outside, eventually like, I'm gonna see a bird, I'm gonna just like chase it. So yeah, I haven't given up. I'm not DNF in the Temple of the Golden Pavilion because this is an amazing book. I have read, I think, 2/3 of it because my partner is at the moment almost halfway. She's reading it, and I what she's reading is far, like it's far behind where I left it. So it's actually not that much, but I probably will start from the beginning, even if sort of like the first half I read a bit faster. Anyways, I'm reading faster when I'm rereading, and then the other part I will sort of like slow down through. But yeah, I'm not DNFing it. I do think this is an amazing book. I enjoyed it a lot when I was reading it. It was just the circumstances, the ever-changing nature of my life. So that's on one side. Then now the books that I have actually read, maybe should start by that, is, well, actually read, that's, that could bring polemic. One of these books I audiobooked and the other one I read. Mainly I audiobooked this book because I couldn't access a physical copy, and the other one I read on an ebook. And I have to say, my opinions about ebooks have changed a little bit, not only because the multiple videos that have been orbiting BookTube in relation to the ownership thereof, the books that are in ebooks. I think that given the price, it's okay to be buying a license instead of a book, as long as that book is not modified. That is the real problem for me. But I would probably make a video specifically about ebooks at some other point, since this seems to be such a hot subject, and I actually really like talking about it. But also, by the way, memory problems on my phone. At some point, this video is gonna cut. I will have to upload it, delete it, and make another video starting from where I had left it. And I don't know how long is that gonna take, so maybe this whole commentary will be divided into 2 videos in 2 different days. Just don't get surprised if the video ends abruptly. That's the tech that I'm having to work with. In fact, I cannot even see my face because the screen is broken, and I'm not wanting to repair this phone because I am trying to detach myself from social media and all that world. But I'm not wanting to detach myself from my beloved booktubers. So yeah, going back to Hiroshima, I didn't read it. I audiobooked it. Is listening the same as reading? No, it is not. Is it comparable in terms of what you can acquire? Yes, I think it is. I think listening to something versus reading it is akin to reading a translation versus reading the original. Some translations are better than the original because some translators are better than the writers that they translate at interpreting what the writers are trying to say. Most of the times, however, we always want to get the original, right? So I don't generally listen to audiobooks unless it's an informative book or a book that I'm not reading for its execution or its lyrical value, but more but for wanting to acquire sort of like something, the content, the ideas, the meaning, whatever. I think, for example, science books. Depends on the science book, but some science books, generally, that's not a problem. Also, textbooks. All my textbooks for like Jet Master and scuba diving, like all the books that I read in terms of like my profession, I often audiobook some of them and then I read some of them, or sometimes I go back and forth depending. Some parts require not taking notes because when you're studying something, but when you're studying something anyways, it's good to go through it many times. And I also many times audiobook as a complement to reading. So I audiobook something before reading it, so that when I read it's already familiar and I get a experience close to really reading a book, which is really when you get the value of most good books is on a second read, at least, or a third, or whatever, depending how old you are and how long you've been reading. But yeah, I think I'm losing the train of thought. Hiroshima. I really liked Hiroshima. I was surprised, and this Hiroshima and Lucretius: The Nature of Things, these two books, are part of a project, another of my projects, similar to the project I have about reading Booktuber's favorite books, which I haven't given up, although I know it's been more than a year, but I still have that in mind. I want to read the favorite book of every Booktuber and everybody I know. But this is separate. This is Steve Donoghue. He's released one of his epic lists, maybe the most epic of all, which is the 100 greatest books of all time. I tried to ask him for the criteria for that greatness, since there are books that are very conspicuously lacking there or missing, and other books that are like surprising introductions. I don't know if that's him wanting to promote books that he considers underrated, or if he genuinely believes that those books are top 100 best books of all time. But Hiroshima and The Nature of Things were sort of like two of the first books that struck me, the ones that like because most of the books that he mentioned, except the ones that are like maybe more polemic proposals, most of the books that he mentioned I knew, and I have already read them, or they're on my reading list, my TBR. But these two I had no idea about them, and with Hiroshima, I have to say, after having read it, the reasons that he gives for this book to be on the list, I think, are not so relevant. I am not so aware of the literary world in the United States and how much that in the Anglo-Saxon world influences the politics, but I feel like a large reason why he introduced this book as one of the best 100 books of all time is not because of the quality of the writing, which is a good book. It's very well written, it's very interesting. It's like literary journalism. It's like a very cool way to tell a story, relating real events, but in a way that is incredibly engaging. So I enjoyed it a lot, and I was like, there was even one day that I couldn't eat because of what I had been listening to. So you are really there. And you, obviously, when I say Hiroshima, I'm assuming you're already knowing what the book is about. It's about it's a book that follows the lives of a number of survivors to the bomb of Hiroshima during the Second World War, and it follows the lives from right before the bomb until years after, until their lives end, basically, decades after in some cases. So these are some of the few survivors that actually directly witnessed the explosion and suffered its effects and its consequences. So definitely a relevant book, definitely a book that everybody should read, definitely a book that should be a textbook in at least every country that has access or might have access to atomic power, to nuclear bombs. But does that make it one of the 100 greatest books of all time? Depends on the criteria, right? But if you look at the list that he made, sometimes he goes for one thing and sometimes he goes for the other. In this case, it really feels like he chose this title because of the influence that it had on the real world. The fact that he thinks that because this book was mandatory reading and children read it, it went a long way toward not only like perhaps like fueling pacifist movements, but also toward like not having another second nuclear bomb, a third nuclear bomb falling on another populated area. it basically, he thinks that in some way this might have prevented nuclear war during the Cold War, I imagine. Could be, you never know how far you can influence somebody when you put yourself outside into the world, when you like write a book or anything like that. But in my opinion, I really don't think so. I think that people who has access to these decisions is not the kind of people who would be reading this book or influenced by the book or even remember this book. And even if it were, like, I think it's down to chance. I don't really think it has the reach that we wanted to have. I think books long ago stopped having the reach that they used to have, and are a genuine social and political influence on the lives of people. And they are more like an esoteric artifact for people to be fascinated by without never really going beyond the front page. So that's my opinion about it. And because, I first of all, I would not use that as criteria. I don't think that the influence of a book makes it greater or not, unless you're talking on those terms. But in my opinion, I'm more interested in knowing what are the 100 best books of all time in terms of the book itself, even if it hadn't been read by more than the person who's saying it, in terms of like its quality, its narrative, its execution, the ideas, the book, not how great is it because of of how the book influenced the great people. But I guess they go hand in hand. So yeah, Hiroshima, incredible. I really don't have much to say about it. I think you should definitely read it. I was 50% fascinated and at the same time nauseated by